Chapter 411. Black Crane. The clone looked like an extremely powerful man from the distance. He was about 10 feet tall and had no hair. His entire body was black, and there were waves of murderous aura spreading out from him. That murderous aura came from those black beetles. At the same time, lying within that murderous aura was a dense life force, and hidden within it was a similarly dense aura of death. The fusion of life and death could be said to be perfect, and it was enough to shock all those who saw it. This was not a normal puppet. In fact, it could be said that there were a lot of differences between this clone and the other Soul Catcher's puppets. Due to Su Ming's nascent soul, the clone looked like a normal person. As Su Ming's clone moved forward, black fog tumbled about under his feet. Buzzing sounds could be heard faintly, echoing in the air. If anyone lifted their heads to look from the ground, they would definitely be terrified by this scene. Black Crane Tribe was not far from this mountain range to begin with. Su Ming's clone would be able to reach it very soon with his current speed. Smoke could be seen coming up from Black Crane Tribe's mountain from the sky in the distance. It was noon at that moment. Clearly, the members of the tribe had lit up fire to cook their food. Some children were still playing, and the warriors stationed around Black Crane Tribe were not on alert. Most of them were lounging around. The stone statue that looked like a crane at the top of the mountain cast a shade on the land under the sunlight. As time passed by, that shade started moving slowly. It was peaceful in the entire tribe, but that peace turned into cries of surprise when Su Ming arrived. The children quickly ran back to their houses, and the expressions of the lounging warriors changed drastically as they looked towards the sky in shock. Su Ming's clone appeared in the sky above Black Crane Tribe with billowing black fog around him. That black appearance and murderous aura that filled his entire body caused the clone's arrival to be met with commotion from Black Crane Tribe. He looked at the nervous warriors within that small tribe coldly, then flew down, landing on the peak of the mountain, right on top of the head of that gigantic crane. As he stood there, Su Ming called out in a deep voice, "Patriarch of Black Crane Tribe, come out." Almost at the same time Su Ming's clone said those words, several old men immediately rushed out of their own houses from the tribe underneath. There was a thin old man among these people. He held a bone cane in his hand, and with a steely face, he stared at Su Ming. However, that person was feeling rather terrified in his heart. He had never met Ji Yunhai before. At that moment, as he saw Su Ming with this appearance, especially that life force and aura of death that filled his entire body, along with that murderous aura, the old man felt as if he could smell the stench of blood in the air. "Sir, who are you?" "I am the Patriarch of Black Crane Tribe." The old man took a step forward and tapped the ground with the cane in his hand before he spoke in a low voice. Su Ming's divine clone smiled coldly. He did not speak, only lifted his right hand to point at the direction below him. Immediately, a dried-up corpse appeared behind him and charged towards the old man. It landed on the ground with a bang. That corpse was naturally the tribe leader of Black Crane. The instant he saw that corpse, the patriarch's pupils shrank. When the other tribe members beside him saw that corpse, their expressions also changed, and they couldn't help it. What is the meaning of this? Who is this? I have never seen him before. The patriarch of Black Crane Tribe gritted his teeth and remarked in a low tone. He had been able to recognize with just one glance that this person was the tribe leader of Black Crane, but he could not admit to his identity no matter what. He could not tell whether this dark man was sent by Madame Ji or by the owner of the mountain range. Yet no matter who sent him, the patriarch was not exactly in a position where he could offend either one, which was why he decided to grit his teeth and not admit to his identity. "It doesn't matter to me whether you admit it or not." A freezing glare appeared in the eyes of Su Ming's clone. He lifted his right hand slowly. This tribe had made him go through all those dangers half a year ago. If Su Ming had not wanted to bring trouble on himself and not destroy this tribe, only choosing to teach them a lesson, then perhaps this would not have happened. Hong Luo's appearance and the things that happened later might have been extremely meaningful for Su Ming, but it also made him a lot of enemies in the land of the shamans. The outcome of it all was not exactly very valuable, and there was in no way Su Ming could accept it if the source of it all did not pay for the consequences. Almost the instant Su Ming lifted his right hand, the patriarch of Black Crane Tribe let out a piercing howl and charged over. Behind him, The other powerful warriors of Black Crane tribe flew up swiftly and charged towards the close as well. This was different from White Bull tribe's restraint. Black Crane tribe had chosen to attack. A cold sneer appeared at the corners of Su Ming's lips. He might not have gotten himself completely used to this body, but if he worked together with the Black Beetles, his battle prowess would increase by a large margin. At that moment, as the people from Black Crane tribe rushed over, Su Ming let out a cold snort. Immediately, a deafening buzz stirred up around him. Then, as if his body was dissolving, the Black Beetles scattered away and flew up. At the same moment they turned into a black fog. They charged towards the incoming members of Black Crane tribe with hisses and killing intent. At the same time, the true appearance of Su Ming's clone was revealed. The dried-up body and grey eyes made all those who saw him feel terrified. Shrill cries of pain instantly spread through the attackers. Those people who had rushed over were enveloped by a large amount of Black Beetles. Blood gushed all over the place from their bodies. They no longer rushed forward, but chose to quickly retreat. Su Ming watched everything aloofly while standing on the crane's head. He lifted his right hand and made a seal before pointing in the direction before him. Immediately, the power of the world around him rushed to him with a boom, gathering up into a gigantic sword before him. He lifted that sword and swung it down in the direction below him. The patriarch of Black Crane tribe let out a low growl and pushed his hands forward to crash into the incoming sword. His body shuddered, and a purplish-red hue appeared on his face, but he managed to keep that sword in midair. There was not a hint of change on the clone's face. He only said one word coldly: "Explode." Once that word was spoken, the sword suddenly exploded and stirred up a whirlwind that swept through the area. The patriarch of Black Crane tribe coughed out a mouthful of blood and tumbled backwards. The instant it happened, Su Ming's clone took a step forward and disappeared. The patriarch of Black Crane tribe saw this with his own eyes, and a bad feeling immediately rose in his heart. As he turned around, his pupils shrank. He saw a finger coming swiftly to tap at the center of his brows. That life-threatening crisis made the patriarch of Black Crane tribe bite his tongue and cough out a huge mouthful of blood. His body rapidly withered away and he looked as if he had aged several dozens of years in an instant. His face was covered in wrinkles and his presence weakened. When Su Ming pierced through the center of his brows, his body started scattering away. Clearly, this was just an afterimage. The old man's body reappeared several hundreds of feet away. His face was ashen and there was fear in it. Shrill cries of pain rang non-stop all around him. All the warriors in the tribe were surrounded by the invincible Black Beetles. Those bugs were mysterious insects that Ji Yun Hai had personally refined in the past. It could be said that these bugs had also given him that fiendish reputation in the shaman tribe. There was in no way such a small tribe like this would be able to kill these bugs so easily. After all, even Su Ming had only been able to make these bugs fall asleep once he isolated Ji Yun Hai's body. Sacred progenitor of Black Crane, I offer my blood to you as a sacrifice. Please awaken. When the patriarch of Black Crane tribe saw his tribe's warriors dying, his eyes became bloodshot. He tore open his chest ferociously and ripped out his own heart right before Su Ming without caring about his blood flowing out nor his life force gradually diminishing. That heart was still beating as the old man held it high above his head. A sharp look appeared on Su Ming's face. Immediately, he heard a large number of voices crying out similar words by his ears. Those people who were fighting against the Black Beetles imitated the old man's actions with madness on their faces. They tore open their chests, ripped out their hearts, and held them high in the air. Sacred progenitor of Black Crane, please receive our offerings and awaken. Bring down sacred punishment on this person. The patriarch of Black Crane tribe coughed out a mouthful of blood. The instant he finished speaking, cracks appeared on the gigantic crane statue at the top of Black Crane tribe's mountain. Rumbling sounds reverberated in the air, and the stone on the statue turned into numerous fragments that shot out everywhere. At the same time, a black figure flew up from the shattered stone statue, turning into a huge black crane that was 100 feet in size. With a screech, that crane turned into a ray of black light that charged straight towards the patriarch of Black Crane tribe. It bit down on his heart and swallowed it. Once it did so, the black light shone once again, and in the span of a few breaths, the crane devoured all the offered hearts. Then with a chilling gaze, it looked towards Su Ming. You're just a puppet at the Berserker Soul Realm. You're not fit for me to attack you. Leave, or else I won't mind making you stay and have you become my toy." As that cold voice came from the black crane's mouth, an incredibly powerful presence swiftly spread around. That presence was so powerful that it made the weather change slightly, and even the clouds looked as if they had become duller. Su Ming's pupils shrank. He stared at the gigantic black crane, and uncertainty rose in his heart. "Sir Sacred Progenitor, you can't let him leave." The old man who had lost his heart was strangely not dead. He was lying down by the side at that moment, struggling to speak. All right. I'll give you the span of 10 breaths. If you don't leave, then I might change my mind and make you stay. I'll have you know that it's been several tens of thousands of years since I last killed someone." The presence within the gigantic black crane increased once again. It looked at Su Ming in a manner of a person looking down on someone else as it spoke slowly. Su Ming's eyes sparkled, then he spread his divine sense swiftly to envelope the area, also scanning through the big crane before he eventually gathered it at the small remaining stone left from the shattered stone statue on the mountain. Divine sense. The expression of the gigantic black crane changed. When it saw Su Ming staring at the remaining half of the stone statue, panic immediately appeared in its eyes, but it disappeared in the blink of an eye, turning instead into ghastliness. "You're not leaving? Fine. Then stay." As the huge crane spoke, its presence became stronger once again. Rumbling sounds rang in the air. The wind and clouds tumbled about, and its body grew larger once again, making it now look 1,000 feet in size. Its voice was like a tidal wave that spread in all directions. Yet Su Ming turned a deaf ear to its words and did not even spare it a glance. He walked towards the remaining half of the stone, lifted his right hand, and placed his hand on it. "You! What are you doing? Stop. Let's talk peacefully, bro." Chapter 412, Small Chick. When Su Ming pressed down on that remaining half of the stone statue, cracks immediately appeared on it. As cracking sounds appeared along with the spread of the cracks, the black crane that had already become 1,000 feet big charged towards Su Ming with a huge gust of wind from behind him. "I gave you a wide path to tread, but you didn't take it. There was no road leading to hell, but you forced your way into it. I'm going to kill you." With a ferocious expression, the 1,000 feet black crane closed in on Su Ming with its gigantic body in an instant, bringing with it a murderous aura. With a flap of its wings, that strong gust of wind immediately forced the people on the ground to be pushed back incessantly. However, when that wind fell on Su Ming, it only managed to make him stop for a moment and did nothing else. He turned his head around and cast a glance at the 1,000 feet black crane, then lifted his right hand and struck down the cracked half of the stone statue. The instant his palm struck, the eyes of the nascent soul in Su Ming's body sparkled. A mighty power surged from his arm into the stone statue with a bang. The stone statue immediately shattered in pieces and the fragments shot in all directions, but there was nothing in there. Su Ming could not help but frown. He had scanned that statue with his divine sense previously, and had clearly felt a faint wave there. It was this wave that stirred up the power of the world in the area and made it turn into that big crane in midair. "HMPH. Fine. Your grandpa crane will give you one more chance. If you leave immediately, then I will let this slide. If you don't, then don't blame me for attacking you. I'm telling you, I'm very powerful." The 1,000 feet crane seemed to have let out a sigh of relief and stared at Su Ming in midair while speaking sternly. Su Ming's eyes sparkled. He turned around swiftly, and with one step, he arrived at the previously shattered rock at a lightning-fast speed. He grabbed one of the stones, then the illusionary shadow of a palm appeared on his right hand. With one squeeze, that illusionary shadow also seized that rock, and with a bang, that rock immediately shattered. There was nothing inside. But Su Ming did not stop there. In a flash, he arrived at another rock, then did the same thing he'd done previously, crushed it again. "You bully!" Panic and terror rose in the 1,000 feet large crane in the sky. It looked as if it was beyond rage. With a flap of its wings, it let out a piercing screech. "You must think I'm full of empty threats, that's why you're not scared. All right, Looks like I have to go back on the promise I made years ago. Once I beat you up, let's see whether you still think that way." As the 1,000 feet crane cried out shrilly, it started spinning in midair, and as it did so, black feathers instantly shot out from the vortex. Su Ming had his hand around a stone at that moment. Once he crushed it, he immediately felt something dangerous charging towards him. He did not turn his head back but took a step forward, and his body immediately disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already 100 feet away from his previous spot. With a bang in the sky, the ground trembled, a countless number of rocks and dust rolled down the mountain, and a gigantic pit formed below. At the same time, feathers flew out swiftly from that deep pit. They whistled as they flew into the air and charged towards Su Ming. "Heh, now you see how powerful I am, right? Well, even if you want to leave now, it's too late." There was smugness in the crane's voice coming from the sky. At that moment, it changed once again and transformed into a vortex. This time, even more feathers charged out and went towards Su Ming. The entire sky was practically filled with black feathers. All of them were incredibly sharp, and as they whistled in the air, they chased after Su Ming. His clone's gray eyes sparkled. He did not manage to dodge those feathers chasing after him even after several warps. In fact, as he continued dodging, there were already 7 to 8 feathers that had managed to pierce his body. They quickly melted and turned into wisps of black smoke that seeped into his body, going straight for his nascent soul. Su Ming let out a sharp cry. His body flashed once again and he reappeared on the ground. The feathers in the sky came after him. The instant they charged towards him from midair, he stretched his arms out wide, and immediately, the black beetles turned into black clouds that came towards him in an instant. Before those feathers managed to pierce through Su Ming, the black beetles had already covered his entire body, causing the clone to return to being covered head to toe in black, regaining his tall and big man's appearance. Booming sounds shot up once again, and the feathers fell on Su Ming's body like rain, causing the ground beneath his feet to shatter because of it. The earth sank in, and Su Ming also fell into that pit, sinking further and further down. The feathers stabbed his body, turning into black smoke that tried to seep through the dense black beetles and crawl into him. In the blink of an eye, booming sounds from the pit filled the air. When all the feathers disappeared, the members of Black Crane Tribe who had witnessed everything immediately cheered. The large crane in midair also looked incredibly pleased with itself. It flapped its wings and let out a few fake coughs. Due to the promise I made in the past, I originally did not want to injure him heavily, but this person did not appreciate my kindness. "Oh well, remember to offer me more sacrifices. I'm tired now. I need to." As the large crane spoke, its voice suddenly died down, and it narrowed its eyes to the point that it looked as if it wanted to squeeze its eyeballs out of its sockets. It whipped its head around to look at the pit underneath. Right before its eyes, it saw a pressure spreading from the pit, and it was soon followed by a brilliant flash. As that light shone, a small person about the size of a palm could be seen floating within. That person's face was dark and he no longer bore Ji Yun Hai's appearance. That small person was naturally Su Ming's nascent soul. The body of this type of nascent soul was something the people of Black Crane Tribe had never seen before. Once they saw it, they were all taken aback, and the patriarch, who had lost his heart but was still alive, also widened his eyes. "Nascent soul. You're an immortal. Damn it. How dare a nascent soul like you fly out at your level? Go back. Do you know that just a gust of wind of yin and your nascent soul will shatter? Why you? Go back." The large crane immediately cried out in a panic. Su Ming's nascent soul floated out of the pit, and with sparkling eyes, he looked at the screaming crane. The crane was greatly different in his eyes now. It was just an illusion, and only the black feather in its body was real. Ignoring the black crane, Su Ming immediately lowered his head and swept his gaze through the land with a dark light in his eyes. Then with one step, he immediately warped away. When he reappeared, he was already on a broken stone located not too far away. He seized at the air with his tiny hand, and immediately, that stone charged towards his palm. "Bro! Let's have a proper talk. Don't." The large crane immediately cried out, and as it screamed, before Su Ming managed to catch the stone that was being sucked to his hand, that stone exploded and shattered on its own. A black ray of light flew out from within, and inside that light was a small black crane that was the size of a fist. The small crane looked incredibly cute. It did not have a lot of feathers, only a few. At first glance, it did not look like a crane, but instead was more like a long-necked chick that had its feathers plucked out. At that moment, the small crane looked like it was in a state of panic. It charged forth, as if it wanted to run away, but with a glint in his eyes, Su Ming's nascent soul swiftly gave chase. The small crane let out a shrill cry, and it became much faster, charging straight towards the large crane in the sky. At the same time, the large crane in the sky shuddered and its body instantly began fading away, eventually turning to a feather, and when the small crane wanted to seize it with its mouth, Su Ming's nascent soul opened his mouth wide and a ray of green light shot out. It was naturally the small virescent sword, and it was charging at a speed much faster than Su Ming's to appear before the small crane. The few feathers on the small crane's body immediately stood up. It let out a shrill cry and no longer bothered about that black feather. With one turn, it ran off into the distance swiftly, and with just a few flashes, it disappeared without a trace. Su Ming's nascent soul grabbed the black feather, then fixed his gaze at the spot where the small crane disappeared, quickly giving chase. Damn it! I am the sacred beast of celestial Tao. I could have killed a puny nascent soul cultivator like you with just one breath. Now, the cranes have fallen, and the land of the berserkers is being trampled by others. Why you? Just you wait. The small crane immediately shot forth and avoided that ray of green light that charged by its side. It shuddered in fear, and its pathetic look made it seem even more like it was a long-necked small chick that had lost its feathers. It became even faster. Su Ming's nascent soul was right behind and continued with his relentless pursuit. He had already naturally seen through the strangeness of the crane. It should be from the immortal tribe, and now that he ran into it, he would definitely not let it go so easily. You were the one who forced me. I'll fight you. When the chick saw Su Ming closing in, it found that the green rays were becoming more frequent, and coupled with the dejection it felt, along with its very important feather being snatched away, that small chick. The more the small crane thought about it, the more upset it became. At that moment, it turned around and madness blossomed in its eyes. Celestial Tao, sacred light, it cried out in a shrill voice, opening its mouth wide to breathe out a puff of air at Su Ming. That puff of air was invisible, and the instant it was exhaled, a strong light shone out of nowhere. The power of the world around them was absorbed towards them, causing the ray of light to shoot through hundreds of thousands of feet as if it was the sun. It did not rush towards Su Ming but exploded abruptly between the two of them. There were no booms, only an almost violent gust of wind blowing past. There was a powerful propelling force contained in that wind, pushing Su Ming's nascent soul back. At the same time, the small crane also let out a shrill cry of pain. It was pushed back, causing its speed as it escaped to increase exponentially, and in the blink of an eye, it disappeared. When did this damn sacred light of celestial Tao become so weak? I wasn't boasting earlier, I could destroy a world with just one breath, but now, I can't even kill a small nascent soul cultivator. Just you wait. I'm a bird that holds onto my grudges. A lot. Immensely as the small crane left, its voice also gradually became weaker. As for Su Ming, he was pushed back by that violent gust of wind, and his nascent soul was left several tens of thousands of feet away. He executed several warps and only then did he manage to avoid the impact of the force. Yet even so, his nascent soul had already become quite transparent because of it. He stood in midair, not bothered by the transparent condition and weakness of his nascent soul. Instead, Su Ming stared in the direction the small crane had ran off to, then after some time, he let out a cold harumph and turned around to leave. Chapter 413, Crystal Fusion. The patriarch of Black Crane Tribe was now ashen pale. He stared at the sky with a blank look and a bittersweet smile appeared on his lips. He knew that he would definitely die, and he could not blame anyone for this. If it was not because of his own greed over the shaman crystals that caused him to try and destroy White Bull Tribe, he would have not brought such a disaster on his own head. By his side, most of his tribe members who had offered up their hearts had died. The remaining few old people were by the patriarch's side, and their faces were ashen, their presences weak. Patriarch, please cast the spell quick. We're begging you. Don't stall anymore. We have to cast the spell quick, according to the spell our ancestors left for us. You won't die. There was a middle-aged man kneeling before the patriarch of Black Crane tribe at the moment, and that man was speaking anxiously. I have to die. If I don't die, then their grudges won't disappear. If I can buy the tribe's peace with my death, then there is at least value in my death. This is my fault. I shouldn't have been greedy for the shaman crystals. Ha! The patriarch of Black Crane tribe said in a pained voice. He had lived for a long time and was the patriarch of a tribe, so he was definitely not a stupid person. He knew perfectly well that this time he had to die. Patriarch! Sorrow filled the middle-aged man and the other tribe members' faces. Enough. This is already decided. Once I die, take out the 3 sacred feathers of our tribe and offer it to the man. Use them in hopes for exchanging for the tribe's safety, and then, take our people away. We will have to migrate before the date. From now on, you are the patriarch of your tribe. Blood poured down from the patriarch's lips as he looked at the middle-aged man kneeling before him. Grief was clear on the man's face. He did not speak. Remember this. Do not think about taking revenge. The patriarch of Black Crane tribe gave a broken smile and he fell to the side, dead. He could originally live, but he could not. He could have not died, but for the tribe, he had to die. As he died, the old men who had lost their hearts also breathed their last. Most of the powerful shamans in Black Crane tribe were gone. When Su Ming's nascent soul returned, he saw the patriarch's corpse and the members of Black Crane tribe kneeling down on the ground under the lead of a middle-aged man. Once they saw him, with a calm expression, Su Ming charged towards the deep pit in the ground. After the burning of an incense stick, his clone slowly flew up from the pit. Sir, please forgive us. We are willing to offer you our tribe's sacred items. Once Su Ming flew out, with sorrow on his face, the middle-aged man from Black Crane tribe lifted his arms high in the air. There was a stone plate in his hands, and there were 3 black feathers on it. There were waves of pressure spreading from those 3 feathers. Yet compared to the feather Su Ming obtained previously, they were insignificant. Su Ming swept his gaze past the 3 feathers coldly. He did not look at the middle-aged man but towards the dead patriarch of Black Crane tribe. He remembered that the old man had not died when his heart was eaten by the small crane. Clearly, there was some sort of secret in Black Crane tribe's offering that allowed the people who made sacrifices to continue living. However, the old man still died. Su Ming closed his eyes. When he reopened them a moment later, understanding appeared in his eyes. He paid the price, so I'll let it go. Su Ming averted his gaze and looked towards the normal tribe members in the tribe. Then he walked towards the air and turned into a long arc that gradually disappeared into the horizon. He did not take the 3 feathers. Those things were useless to him, but to a small tribe that lost most of their powerful warriors, the use of those feathers was great. Su Ming was not the type to kill everyone and spare no one. His grudge had disappeared when the patriarch of Black Crane tribe and the other powerful warriors died. Su Ming sat in his cave abode in the mountain range and held the wind crystal of inheritance in his hands. There was a long gash on his arm. The blood there had dried up, and there was a variety of emotions on his face. If anyone took a closer look, then they could see that the size of the wind crystal of inheritance had shrank slightly. When Madame G brought out the red ring that day, she took it out from a bone. With that method, she managed to use the ring. Else, she wouldn't have had to suffer so much and could have just put it on her finger, Su Ming mumbled under his breath. I tried putting this thing in the gash on my arm earlier, and when I circulated my qi, I managed to absorb some of it, but I only managed to absorb a little of it. It wasn't particularly useful. Su Ming held the wind crystal of inheritance in his hands in a tight grip, then gritted his teeth. Oh well, I'll try it with my original idea, but I won't do it here. We're at room temperature here. If I use this method, I'll lose too much blood. Su Ming stood up and took a deep breath before he lifted his head to look at the fire ape crouching and leaning against a wall. His lips curled up in a smile. The fire ape also looked at Su Ming and bared its teeth as if it was smiling at him. It looked rather excited. He walked up and patted the fire ape's head, then walked out of his cave abode. Once he walked out, the small snake on the poison corpse's head immediately looked towards him. Su Ming fell into a moment of pensive silence, then gave up on bringing the poison corpse on his journey. He sent out a thought and comforted the small snake before walking out of the mountain range towards the frozen gate to the void floating in the air. Standing next to the gate to the void, Su Ming closed his eyes, as if he was waiting for something. After a moment, ripples appeared in the sky, and his clone appeared to stand behind him. Su Ming opened his eyes and lifted his right hand to press against the frozen gate to the void. Immediately, the layer of ice shattered slightly. Once a crack showed up, Su Ming moved inside. His clone followed behind him, and with a flash, he disappeared along with Su Ming and the gate to the void. The deep parts of the black seawater and the endless glacier were still as dark as ever. There were numerous living beings sealed in the glacier, keeping their former appearances of when they were alive. They looked as if they were struggling. The silence around the area seemed to have been there for countless amount of years. The only things that would appear in that black seawater were the occasional creatures of the sea swimming past the area. In an ice mountain above the glacier was a frozen gate. At that moment, as that gate shone with a dark light, two figures appeared. Naturally, it was Su Ming and his clone. Once they appeared, they did not move, and it was clear that they were also frozen. It would not be until a few days later when the ice cracked and shattered that Su Ming and his clone would be able to move about in that ice mountain. The freezing air chilled Su Ming's bones, and he felt as if his flesh and blood were about to freeze. The circulation of his blood had become a lot slower. His clone stood by the side. With those black beetles around, coupled with the fact that this puppet was originally dead to begin with, it was only natural that he did not fear the cold. As his aura of death fused with the freezing air, he could move around with much more nimbleness and ease compared to Su Ming. His eyes shone brilliantly, and he was prepared to protect his host. Su Ming sat down on the ice in the area where he could move around with no problems. He closed his eyes and waited for a few hours. When his body was almost frozen, he opened his eyes, and as he lifted his right hand, the wind crystal of inheritance appeared. At the same time, his clone opened his mouth and spat out a ray of green light that turned into a small sword. That sword charged towards Su Ming under the control of his nascent soul. With a bang, the small sword stabbed Su Ming's back. The frozen body caused Su Ming to be numb towards the pain and to be at ease with it. He only frowned slightly but did not make a sound. The small sword stabbed into his back and started cutting apart his flesh downwards, revealing a small part of his spine inside. Blood spilled out and seeped into the ice. Due to the freezing air, there was not much blood. However, even if the body was frozen, the pain still made Su Ming's breathing quicken. There were 4 vertebrae on Su Ming's spine that were shining with a blue light. Those were his berserker bones. As the small sword stabbed into his flesh, a glint appeared in the clone's eyes. He lifted his right hand, and the wind crystal of inheritance in Su Ming's hand floated and circled above his head once before charging straight to his back, plunging itself deep into the opened wound. Once it touched the 5th vertebrae on Su Ming's spine, the crystal stuck itself closely there. Su Ming's face was pale. His entire body might be frozen, but there was still sweat beading on his forehead. However, there was determination on his face. His right hand was trembling when he lifted it up. He seized at the air, and immediately, half of the lightning crystal of inheritance appeared in his hand. He hesitated for a moment, then gritted his teeth. Immediately, that lightning crystal of inheritance shone and flew up to plunge into the wound on his back, right at his 6th vertebrae. When Su Ming forced both of the crystals of inheritance into his body as if he was planting them in himself, he closed his eyes and dispersed the power he was using to resist the cold. His body was slowly covered by ice, and eventually, his entire body froze up, and he turned into an ice statue. Su Ming's clone sat by the side and observed the surroundings vigilantly, protecting his host. Time trickled by. Su Ming had no idea how long he would need to complete this slightly insane action of his. In fact, if he did not have his clone by his side, it would be difficult for him to do this. The slightest lapse of attention when he was doing this would perhaps make him freeze to death in his weakness. Due to his nascent soul, his clone could sense his host's condition. Once in a while, he would send a warm wave of power into Su Ming's body, causing him to remain alive while encased in ice. He would be in a state of life and death, which would cause the blood on his back to slowly freeze up so that he could gradually absorb the crystal's power and gain an epiphany towards them. At that moment, Su Ming's back looked horrifying. His spine was partially revealed and his flesh was ripped apart. There was a small amount of blood flowing out, but his flesh and blood were slowly growing back and recovering. However, even if he was recovering, the protruding wind and lightning crystals of inheritance still looked horrifying. Yet as time passed by and as the wounds slowly recovered, the wind crystal of inheritance from the two protruding crystals gradually shrank. Su Ming still had his eyes closed. As pain showed on his face, confusion would sometimes show as well, and occasionally, he would look like he was thinking hard about something, and at other times, he would look delighted. The wind crystal of inheritance became smaller, right until one day sometime in the future, the protruding wind crystal of inheritance had shrank by a large half. The remaining part might still be protruding from Su Ming's back, but if no one took a closer look, it would be difficult for them to notice it. On this day, in Su Ming's mind, a storm stirred up, and it was the storm of inheritance. Chapter 4:14. 3 Styles of Wind Separation. There was a layer of fog in the grey sky, and there seemed to be a sea of clouds tumbling about in the area. No one would be able to tell whether this was the sea of the sky, or whether it was the sea of the ground at just one glance. Su Ming could not sense his own body. It was as if he had turned into a gust of wind in the sea of clouds and floated in the world, not knowing where he wanted to go. Perhaps a long time had passed, or perhaps it had just been a moment. Su Ming, whose mind was a little muddled at that point, suddenly saw a long-haired man sitting in the endless sea of white and grey clouds before him. That man was tall and thin. He was dressed in green and his hair was very long. He might not look handsome, but there was an elegant grace about him, especially his long and narrow eyes. They looked like the eyes of a woman, and those eyes that seemed like they belonged on a phoenix was an unforgettable sight. At the same time Su Ming saw this man, the man slowly opened his eyes, and a brilliant light shone within them. "You came, my scion." Su Ming's mind trembled. His slightly muddled mind suddenly cleared up, and he remembered that he was absorbing the wind crystal of inheritance in the glacier. He also remembered the storm that stirred up in his head at the end, along with himself appearing in this sea of clouds like a spirit once that storm was over. This sort of inheritance is only privy to the first scion. You will be the only one who can see me. The scions after you will not see me, but they will see you, the man with the long and narrow eyes stated slowly in a gentle voice. I am the Wind Berserker. I have become a saint after understanding the power of wind. I fought with the god of berserkers against the 9th great timeline in the great world containing all regions. Everywhere we went, there was no one who did not dare worship us. Now, what remains in this place is a fragment of my will that I left behind when I was about to leave the 9th timeline in the great world with the god of berserkers to search for other timelines in hopes of seeking a chance for a breakthrough. I left the fragment behind so that the future generation may inherit my title as the Wind Berserker. The power of the Wind Berserker changes all the time and it can't be inherited in one go. That's why I separated it into 3 divine abilities. If you can master them all, then you will have understood a fifth of what it means to be the Wind Berserker. The first of the 3 styles of wind separation is Sun Genesis. The man with the long and narrow eyes spoke slowly, and the moment he said those last words, his eyes sparkled. He lifted his right hand and waved it at the sky above the sea of clouds. Push aside the clouds in the sky, and you can make the sea of clouds stir, you can make the sun reveal itself. All you need to activate the power of Sun Genesis is wind. As his words echoed in the air, the sea of clouds started tumbling ferociously and turned into a giant vortex. With the man as the center, the vortex encircled such a huge area that it seemed endless, and with booming sounds, it started spinning. Su Ming stood by the side and watched the sea of clouds spinning. He could even imagine that if anyone looked up from the ground at that moment, they would definitely find themselves witnessing a terrifying sight. A sight where all the clouds in the sky started spinning and turning into a vortex. Where does wind come from? The man with the long and narrow eyes smiled. Wind comes when I wave my arms, and I channel it to the sky to move the sea of clouds. When the sea of clouds turns into a vortex, the wind will come back several times stronger. More accurately speaking, Sun Genesis is divided into 3 levels. The first is wind propelling, the second is wind borrowing, and the final level is sun genesis. The man with the long and narrow eyes clenched his right fist, and the instant he formed that fist, the sea of clouds around them that had turned into a vortex, with a rumble, rushed towards the man. Eventually, as Su Ming's mind trembled, he saw the vortex disappearing into the man's right fist. It was as if the entire process of him clenching his fist happened during the instant the endless sea of clouds rapidly gathered towards him. It was just as if the man was holding the endlessly rotating sea of clouds in his right hand. It was as if he now held the boundless power of the wind in the world in his hand. Sun Genesis. With his right fist, the man punched forward gently, seemingly without any power, but when that punch was delivered, a violent gust of wind that could not be described with words erupted forth. It felt as if a shocking thunder had crackled during a quiet dawn, as if the storm spanning 100,000 feet had erupted on the quiet surface of a sea, as if an ear-splitting boom had resounded in a meadow. The violent gust of wind turned into a wind dragon. As it roared, it charged out and tore through the sky, causing a gigantic pit to appear in the air. The wind dragon roared, then crawled into the pit and disappeared. The second style, lunar burial. The wind berserker narrowed his eyes, and a green glare appeared within them. I personally like this style a lot. I didn't create this style on my own either. I gained an epiphany for it from an ancient legend. I also went to a lot of ancient ruins to examine them so that I could finally produce this ancient legend. I believe that this art had existed since the beginning but was only lost in time. I am merely restoring it slightly. In older times, there was a legend that said that when the ancients die, they are not buried in the sky or the earth. They are instead buried in the wind. The wind is their coffin. A smile appeared on the man's lips, but it looked rather sinister. He pointed at the ground with 2 fingers of his right hand. When Su Ming lowered his head to look, the ground underneath suddenly turned indistinct. It did not last long, and the ground became clear once again. But once it became distinct, what appeared before Su Ming was no longer the ground he'd seen previously. Instead, it had turned into a place filled with people. A large number of people whose clothes and appearances could not be seen clear were now on the ground. They all prostrated themselves, and Su Ming heard words he could not understand coming out from their mouths in the form of buzzing sounds. From the sky, he could see that these people numbered to several tens of thousands. They stood close to each other and formed a gigantic circle. The center was empty except for a gigantic wooden tower. At the top of the tower was a bound corpse that hung high in the sky. "Look closely, my scion," the man with the long and narrow eyes suddenly said. Su Ming immediately looked down with rapt attention, forcing down his shock, not shifting his eyes from the spot. The tens of thousands of people surrounding the giant wooden tower on the ground started moving slowly. All of them were walking and looking at the sky. It was as if the circle they had formed was spinning. This scene sparked curiosity in Su Ming's heart. He could not tell just what sort of connection these people's actions had with lunar burial. However, as time passed by, the tens of thousands of people on the ground gradually stopped walking slowly and started running. The tens of thousands of people running all together caused the circle to start spinning even faster. Could it be that the vortex is formed when the people run, and that's how they form wind? A sharp glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. As the tens of thousands of people ran, a wave of hot air spread from all these people. This was a wave that naturally came to be as their qi circulated in their bodies. Perhaps the hot air from a singular person would not be much, but when tens of thousands of people ran together, it would look incredibly distinct. Once that hot air spread from their bodies, it started floating into the sky slowly. At the same time, several hundreds of people immediately shot up from the running crowd and charged into the sky to stand above the bound corpse on the gigantic wooden tower. These hundreds of people sat down cross-legged over there, and a chilling aura spread from their floating bodies. That chilling air immediately spread through the area, causing the place to abruptly turn cold. What happened next took Su Ming completely by surprise. With his own eyes, he saw the chilling air that was seeping out of these hundreds of people descend to the area underneath, and during that process, that chilling air instantly clashed with the hot air floating upwards. The instant they clashed, a violent gust of wind appeared out of nowhere, stirring up sharp whistling sounds. At the same time, the tens of thousands of people on the ground opened their mouths and shouted one word. Burial. The voice shook the sky, causing the tens of thousands of people to run even faster, and more hot air spread from their bodies. The hundreds of people sitting cross-legged and floating in the sky also opened their eyes at that moment and roared simultaneously. Lunar. The moment they shouted, a larger amount of chilling air spread out and descended to the area underneath. Once it clashed with the hot air, the wind started interacting as if they were convecting heat, and it gave birth to stronger wind. The wind swept past the land and blew against the corpse bound on the gigantic wooden tower, causing the dead man's blood and flesh to rapidly dry up from that indescribably man-made wind, eventually turning into skin and bones, ending up as a dried-up corpse. That was not the end. As the words burial and lunar were repeatedly shouted, the wind became stronger, and after an unknown amount of time passed by, as Su Ming's heart was shaken to the core, he saw the dried-up corpse turning to ashes. As the wind was born, the ashes disappeared into the world, and once they disappeared, this scene, which was clearly from a ritual, returned to being indistinct and disappeared from Su Ming's eyes. That is lunar burial, the man with the long and narrow eyes said. Su Ming looked at the muddled ground that had returned to how it originally was with a blank stare, and his heart was in chaos, as if there were waves crashing against it. He was not shocked by the lunar burial but stunned by these people's intelligence, and how wind was formed. Is this how wind is formed? The clash of cold and heat. Perhaps I should say it is the transfer between cold and heat that formed wind. Convection forms wind. That's right, if I throw a punch, I will cause wind to stir, but I've never thought about how that wind came to be. By the looks of it now, wind is born due to the transfer between two auras. Su Ming looked as if he had gained an epiphany. My scion, wind exists in all parts of the world, but if you can separate the wind from a particular region, thereby causing wind to no longer exist in that region, then you can become the lord of that region. Without wind, there is no aura, and without aura, there is no power. When the power of the world is sealed within, when all manner of aura no longer exists, then from then on, the place where you are will be a forbidden area for all lives, and that is wind separation. The 3 styles of wind separation contain all my understanding towards wind. I am passing it to you, and it will depend on you on how much you can understand out of the provenance of wind. Also, besides wind separation, I will also use the remaining fragment of my will to give you 3 chances to gain an epiphany. Each of the chances will be for a style of the divine ability. This is your first chance, Epiphany for Sun Genesis. The man with the long and narrow eyes disappeared as he spoke. Soon after, a violent gust of wind whistled by and enveloped Su Ming within. Chapter 4:15. Three-Headed Dark Turtle. Time passed by, and in the blink of an eye, it was 6 months later. A year had gone by since the chaos caused by Hong Luo to the land of the shamans. Several large-scale battles had happened in the war outside Sky Mist City, while the small-scale battles launched over the war zone were already so numerous that they could not be counted. These battles were only becoming more intense. The defense of Sky Mist City was also gradually being weakened. Most of the powerful berserkers in the Berserker tribe were acting as garrisons for Sky Mist City. There was a rumor regarding the calamity of the Eastern Wastelands spreading out secretly among the berserkers, and most of those who heard it took it with a grain of salt. There were no longer any tribes located at the edge of the Dead Sea in the land of the shamans. Almost a seventh of the tribes had migrated. However, there were some tribes that did not migrate. These tribes either had no power to migrate or were small tribes that would have difficulties if they moved too far even if they wanted to migrate, which was why they decided to stay. White Bull Tribe was one of the tribes in the latter category. They struggled before, pondered over it, had the urge to migrate, had even sent their people to venture out in search for any migrating tribes that would pass by their tribe, but eventually, they had no choice but to give up. This was a remote land to begin with. If their tribe members traveled far and wide, they would perhaps run into migrating tribes, but that was only a possibility. If they did not meet any of them, then instead of being destroyed, they would rather stay in their tribe. On the last month of the past 6 months, the monkey-faced old man, the patriarch of White Bull Tribe, went to the area near Su Ming's mountain range multiple times. He still believed that there was something off about the place. When he learned about the things that happened to Black Crane Tribe, he became even more skeptical of Su Ming's mountain range. The old man was polite every single time he came to the place, even after he'd visited it many times. He would respectfully shout outside the mountain range in hopes of meeting Su Ming, but never received any response. However, the old man did not give up. He always came back once every few days. Time passed by this way, and the fire ape laid around lackadaisically within the seal of the mountain range. The small snake flew in midair. As for the poison corpse, he continued standing at the entrance of the cave abode and never moved once during those 6 months. The ice on the frozen gate to the void still remained during that half a year. It continued releasing cold air and never melted. Su Ming was sitting cross-legged in the ice mountain located in the glacier surrounded by black seawater. His body was completely frozen up. His clone had protected him for half a year. There was no longer any blood flowing out of Su Ming's back. His wound had slowly recovered during the 6 months. By now, there was only a bump that could be seen belonging to the lightning crystal of inheritance. As for the wind crystal of inheritance, it practically could not be seen anymore. There were 4 berserker bones in Su Ming's spine, but at that moment, the 5th vertebrae was shining with a green light, and it seemed as if it had already transformed. Its appearance might not have changed, but it gave people a similar feeling to the wind crystal of inheritance. It was as if the shrunken wind crystal of inheritance had been absorbed by the 5th berserker bone. Another month passed by. On this day, the layer of ice surrounding Su Ming, who had isolated himself there for 7 months, suddenly shook. At the same time it started shattering and cracking. Su Ming opened his eyes slowly. The instant he opened his eyes, besides the profundity in his gaze that already existed before, there was also a vortex that looked like a whirlwind in his eyes. At the same time, the layer of ice around him shattered with a bang, causing Su Ming to regain mobility. He silently sensed the changes in his body, and he could clearly feel that he had become much stronger compared to how he was before he isolated himself, and more importantly, Sun Genesis, huh? Su Ming lowered his head and looked at his right hand. There was a brilliant flash in his eyes. In the one chance he had to gain his epiphany during his entire process of understanding the inheritance of the Wind Berserker, he had tried countless times to cast Sun Genesis. In that sort of condition to gain his epiphany, Su Ming had a feeling that he had been reborn in that illusion filled with wind. He lightly formed a fist and stood up slowly. The instant he stood up, the clone behind him also did the same. Su Ming did not turn his head back, but instead stared at the shell of the ice mountain and the glacier before him. After a moment of pensive silence, his gaze fell at the spot sealing the green-scaled man 800 feet away. After thinking for some time, Su Ming lifted his right hand and touched the layer of ice before him. Immediately, it cracked. After another moment, it shattered, and black seawater instantly surged in. But the instant the seawater surged in, Su Ming had already walked out of the ice mountain. His clone also followed behind him. He did not bother about the ice mountain behind him. A wave of pressure descended on them in that black seawater, causing Su Ming to sink, but his expression was calm as he walked forward slowly. He walked forward until he was 800 feet away from the ice mountain. When he arrived at the place sealing that green-scaled man, Su Ming once again felt the difference between his current self and his previous self. Before he fused with the wind crystal of inheritance, walking 800 feet was already his limit, but now, he felt that he could still walk several dozens of feet forward. As he stared at the ice mountain sealing the green-scaled man, Su Ming furled his right hand into a fist and punched. At the same time, his clone behind him took a step forward and pointed at the ice through the water. Immediately, densely packed circles of cracks appeared on the layer of ice Su Ming punched. Green light flashed, and the small sword flew out from his clone to stab into the crack. At that moment, Su Ming lifted his right hand, and when the sword retreated, he pressed his palm on the ice once again. The process repeated several times, and as the cracks on the layer of ice slowly spread outwards, the crushed ice also fell off. Su Ming's spirits lifted and he increased his speed. By working with his clone, they gradually dug a hole in the ice mountain, and behind that hole was the black wooden club with 9 teeth held by the green-scaled man. As the layer of ice continuously became thinner and when he was just 3 inches away from the tip of the club, suddenly, a strong current shot forth from the black seawater above the glacier. At the same time, Su Ming heard a muffled growl. Soon after, a gigantic, muddled figure charged forth from the black seawater. As it closed in, its low growl shook the glacier, causing the seawater to roll, and the pressure formed made Su Ming's heart shake. His eyes sparkled. At the moment, there was already a big hole wide enough to fit a person dug out in the ice mountain. He was less than 3 inches from that club. Before long, he would be able to completely dig through. However, the arrival of that low growl made Su Ming hesitate for a moment before a resolute look appeared on his face. He immediately curled his right hand into a fist and rammed it against the thin layer of ice. His clone attacked at the same time, intending to break through before the unknown creature came over. Yet before Su Ming managed to attack, the low growl traveled to his ears as if the sound came right from his side. The seawater around him started distorting, and an incredible force came charging towards him. Su Ming's expression changed. Without a hint of hesitation, he immediately crawled into the big hole he'd dug out. His clone crawled in at the same time. The moment they blocked the entrance, Su Ming found out, to his shock, that the entire glacier shuddered. His pupils shrank, and he saw a gigantic ferocious beast with an astonishing presence appearing in the seawater. It was a 2-headed dark turtle. 2 of its gigantic heads were outside its shell and were coldly staring at the layer of ice where Su Ming had hid himself. The moment a fierce glint appeared in its eyes, it swung its tail, and immediately, another head rose on its tail. This was not a 2-headed turtle, but a 3-headed dark turtle. Its body was not really that big, only 1,000 feet in size. It stood on the glacier and not many ripples formed from its aura could be seen. However, the presence of its chi left Su Ming afraid raw. The 3 heads of that dark turtle roared at Su Ming at the same time. However, it only stood and roared. It did not do anything else. Su Ming hid himself in the layer of ice. His clone was slightly further ahead, and they were both sealed up by the newly recovered ice mountain. As Su Ming looked at the 3-headed dark turtle outside, he groaned internally. However, gradually, Su Ming noticed something strange about this dark turtle. The creature only roared and did not attack him. This stunned Su Ming momentarily. He remained in pensive silence for a moment. As he saw the ice mountain gradually sealing up, he lifted his right hand and punched the newly returned 3-inch thick layer of ice behind him. Cracks echoed in the air, and the layer of ice became only 2 inches thick. It was also at that moment that the 3-headed dark turtle roared even more furiously as if it had gone mad. It took a big step forward, and at the same time it got closer to the ice mountain. Its tail charged towards the ice mountain with a whistle, but it did not hit the ice. Instead, once it swung down beside the ice mountain, the dark turtle's face became even more savage, and it started growling lowly as it glared at Su Ming. The power of its chi makes it clear that it has incredible power, and it's a power so strong that I've never seen its like before, but it looks as if it doesn't know any divine abilities. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. And by its previous actions, could it be that this creature cannot destroy the ice mountain here? Could it be that it's the guardian beast of the place? A thought bloomed in Su Ming's heart and he moved closer to the thin layer of ice. Immediately, the dark turtle outside roared even more fiercely. It swung its tail back and forth, letting out piercing howls. Su Ming immediately shrank back, putting some distance between himself and the thin layer of ice. The dark turtle clearly relaxed and no longer looked at Su Ming, but instead stared at the green-scaled man that was several inches away from Su Ming, sealed within the thin layer of ice. Su Ming was incredibly nervous at the moment, but his head was calm. Once he saw the dark turtle's actions, he knew that the longer he stayed in the place, the worse it would be for him. That was why he sent a thought to his clone. His clone immediately lifted 2 fingers and tapped at the ice behind them. As it was just a short time since that ice was formed, that one tap immediately broke a small hole. A black beetle instantly flew out and crawled into that hole. Su Ming stared at the bug. When the dark turtle saw the bug flying out, it only spared it a glance and no longer bothered itself with it. It let the small bug fly 800 feet back to where the gate to the void was in the ice mountain.